The way that you talk about order in the book is something that people will take away from it.
Be specific.
Okay, so let me think. The way that you talk about natural dominance hierarchies in lobsters. Let's get on to the lobsters. Because I think that the thing that people take away from that is male lobsters compete for female lobsters, and that says something about society now, that men need to be dominant in society. Because if lobsters do it, then there is something that we can read about humans from that too.
There's nothing in that chapter at all that suggests that the way that men should succeed in human hierarchies is a consequence of the exercise of power. There's not one line in that entire book that claims that, because it's not what I believe. Most human hierarchies, as I already pointed out, are hierarchies of competence, not power.
Okay, so
that's why we don't live in a patriarchal tyranny. And so if you want to be a successful man, then you should be competent, and that will move you up the hierarchy, and that will make you attractive, and for good reason. Unless you want an incompetent mate, which is possible and happens, but isn't something that I would recommend. People will sometimes choose an incompetent mate because they're intimidated by competence, and so they'll settle for someone who they don't respect because they feel that they can master them and they won't be intimidated. But it's not a recipe for a happy life, I can tell you that. So there isn't a line in that chapter that talks about power as the proper means of conducting yourself in life. There's not a line in the book, and there's nothing in anything I've ever said that suggests that.
Okay, no,
but it's really important because people have read this chapter and they make exactly the argument that you make, and it's a misapprehension. So it's a misapprehension of the book.
Okay, but if so many people are getting the same misapprehension, could it be possible?
There aren't so many people that are getting it. There's 2 million people that have bought the book, and there's a very small handful of people who have a particular ideological perspective who enjoy developing that perspective because it indicates just what sort of reprehensible individual I am. But it has absolutely nothing to do with what I wrote or what I've said or what I believe. I don't believe that our fundamental hierarchies are based on power. I don't believe that the way that you move up our hierarchies is as a consequence of manifesting power. It's competence.
Okay. My big problem with the lobsters is that it's scientifically bollocks, right? It's just, you cannot read across from lobsters and what they do to what humans do.
Of course you can. That's why serotonin works on lobsters.
But it works in 2 different ways. So if serotonin makes lobsters more aggressive, it makes humans less aggressive, right? That's what happens.
No, that's not right. Serotonin makes human beings more dominant but less aggressive. And the only reason it makes them more dominant is because they're less irritable and they're less defensively aggressive. So it's not bollocks. I know my neurochemistry. So if you're going to play neurochemistry, let's go and do it.
Okay, well you say antidepressants work on lobsters.
Yes, they do. They make a lobster that's been defeated in a fight more likely to fight again.
That's not the same mechanism that happens in humans.
Yes,
because lobsters don't get depressed as the way that humans are. I think you're anthropomorphizing into a ridiculous degree. These are creatures that urinate out of their faces.
I think that the fundamental issue among knowledgeable animal behaviorists is that anthropomorphization with animals is generally the appropriate tactic unless you have reason to doubt it, which is because there's continuity between us and animals rather than discontinuity. And the idea that the anthropomorphization of animals is inappropriate is something derived from 1950s behaviorism. The highly trained affective neuroscientists and people who study motivation and emotion as well as neurochemistry know perfectly well that there is biological and behavioral continuity across the animal kingdom and way down into the kingdom as well, which is exactly why I chose lobsters, to indicate that there is so much continuity in the systems that allow us to estimate status position that we share it with creatures that are 1/3 of a billion years old. And the reason that I made that argument was to put paid at least in part to the absurd Marxist proposition that hierarchical structures are a secondary consequence of Western civilization and free market economies, which is as preposterous a perspective as you could possibly develop about anything. Hierarchies are 1/3 of a billion years old. You can't blame them on the West or men or capitalism.